Prayer. Or be with us, make it in, help us to be guided by your hand in making decisions that are good for this community, for our parish, for our people. Help us to remember that you're the creator of the universe and you will guide our steps. We open ourselves to your will. Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Do we have a roll call, please? Here.
Good.
Here.
Mr. Moore? Here. Mr. Allen?
Here.
Mr. Masco?
Here.
Mr. Career? Mr. Salmon? Mr. Salmon?
Here. Here.
Ms. Small? Mr. Brandon? Marietta? Here.
Mr. Chairman, before we start, each of the committee members should find in front of you, because you guys have requested it, the Washita Parish ordinances that Assistant District Attorney Lee Mitchell referred to when you were here last time. And you can take that home and take a look at it. I think I had already given you previously their request for proposal that they put out. This was the mapping ordinances to back up that proposal.
I think we share the comments we got in some of the minutes. We also need to pay a motion to, I think you all received the minutes of the last meeting and meeting prior to that. For entertaining a motion to adopt the minutes for April 29th, 2024 and June 5th, 2024. Motion, second. Anybody opposed, all in favor? Without the minutes. This meeting, we kind of set aside for public comment on the whole process of working through right now, ambulance service for our parish. Do you have something you'd like to offer for the record of this committee? We really appreciate hearing from you. It's all about public comment. Welcome your comments. However, it should be relevant to ambulance service and not any personal attacks from anyone or any company. So let's try to be respectful and focus the comments on service and personal attacks. And there's a 3-minute limit. I have a timer on my phone, something time. But I mean, we do want to hear from you. This is a big part of this meeting. It's the primary purpose of today's meeting. So we'd love to be able to hear anyone in the audience. Want to also make sure that the ambulance service providers that may be submitting proposals are also welcome to make comments within the 3-minute limit. So it's not, I don't feel like you can't be part of that public comment period. You can be. So, anyone want to make any public comments? There.
First of all, thank y'all for having me today and speak. Ambulance service is near and dear to my heart. Having been involved with the Florida Legacy Ambulance and Katie came here a couple years ago. Being a volunteer fireman myself, responsible for EMS, I can just tell you many stories why I think there should be a single provider. It's the best for the parish. Who's going to make that call if you're out there at the last minute in a wreck? Makes the decision on who's going to make that call, who's going to be that work off the rotate list, kind of work off the rotate list when it comes to records or that kind of stuff. Sometimes they too big, they're tied up and they have the strength and the resources that our current provider it's just, I can't say enough about it. We work hand in glove with them. I've experienced what they did with my own wife in the past, and even my own self in the past. And time is the essence of you there. And he said, to be sitting and make a decision in a rural parish, I don't know who represents the rural part parish in this board. I'm not saying that I didn't see anybody, and I was concerned about that a little bit. I think the rural part should have had some representation on this board. But rural volunteer fire departments and that nation is a very backbone of fire service and first responder to get out there and what they do. And we're very close to and first responder and with the library. But I will tell you, I spoke before. This is what before city council, that was every report, I was in favor. One sort of provider. Unless you work on the logistics out of that, how that's gonna work out, who's gonna be there, who gets quality, what you're gonna do, 2, 3, what you're gonna do. That's gonna be an issue. I think it's gonna be a huge issue. We rule people's lives every moment, it's precious, and the hard time. We can't wait for the next thing to come. Okay, so, my position is 40 years of experience, it's work, it's not built, you don't need to fix it with anybody. Whoever that best provider for our these parish, that's what I'm doing this year. And I feel strongly about it. Be blessed. Thank you all for what you do.
Thank you, appreciate it, man.
Thank
You must have an internal clock, because you were right on that. Anyone else? State your name, correct?
Good evening, Jesse Dollar, Parish President, San Angelo Parish. We have an ordinance in our parish that's related to animal services. We've always been multiple providers in our parish, and it's worked well. My background is in fire and police, so I experienced everything in the fire service for the 25 years until I was retired. And in our parish, it works. Our parish is very rural, as you know. We have the whole northern part of our parish that takes an hour to get there from the main station in Opelousas. So with the multiple ambulance services in the parish, it provides additional resources to get where it needs to go. Competition is always good in any business, no matter what it is. And for us as a parish, it's good to see that the services that are being provided in our parish, everybody gets along. There's no fighting on the scene, there's no fussing, there's no nothing. The main purpose of their job is to get on scene and make it happen, and they always do. So we have 2 providers, we had 3, and now we're down to 2. And it just works well for us. I was asked to come give my opinion on why we keeping it with at least 2 or more services. And kind of like the gentleman said just now, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like I said, we very rural, and the more the merrier for us. Both services have helicopter services, so it's not like one over the other. They both provide excellent service, and we don't want to have to pick one or the other, and we're not going to pick one or the other, but we're going to make sure that our people are provided the services. Just last year, they had a little issue come up, and they wanted me to pass an ordinance to limit the access to 2 services. And we didn't do it, but what that did do is open up another station on another part of our parish where it needed to be. And I feel if we didn't have the competition, that station wouldn't be open. So, my job is to make sure that the people of our parish get service. And even though we don't regulate animal services and we don't want to get in that business, just trust me, when we started that ordinance, you should have seen the stuff coming out from our council members who wanted to regulate every little thing, even down to the dollar. I told both animal services, that's not what the government's for. We're here to take care of our people, and that's what we do in our parish, and it's working well. Not sure how it works here, but I was asked to come give you my opinion on why we keeping it with multiple animal services, and that's our reason why we don't have any issues, and it's working. Okay. Thank you.
Question. Don't mind, Dr. Lynn. So You don't have any regulation whatsoever in St. Landry Parish?
We don't have an ambulance ordinance to speak of. Years ago, they wanted us to pass one, for the same purpose, a single source. We didn't do that back then, and we was asked to do it again, we didn't do it. So we don't regulate other than what the state regulates and that's another thing too. As long as the state has its regulations and these ambulance services have to provide that, no reason why we should get involved in regulating something that's not really regulated by the state.
So can you talk us through how an emergency call happens and can you talk us through how that occurs? Somebody calls and says they have a heart attack to your 911 center, or whoever dispatches your 911.
It's on a rotating basis.
Okay.
So the next one up gets the call. And then we also ask both services if they cannot provide that service in immediate need, to let them know upon a call, to pass it on to the next ambulance service, so we can make sure they get provided service. And it's working well in our parish. And that's because the people work together for the common goal, and both services do a great job.
So does the sheriff's office do your 911, or do you have an independent?
911 is on its own, it's a different, it's by itself, yes, sir.
So what happens if somebody shows up at just a crash scene? If both ambulances happen to show up at a crash, I mean, do you have instances where that's occurred? Can you kind of talk
Yes, sir.
through what happens with
But
that?
believe it or not, they work out amongst themselves. And it's never an issue. I know it's a business and they do it as a business, but whenever they get on scene, they act professional, they do what they have to do for the people, and it's never an issue.
And how many carriers do you have that do transport, just medical transport, non-emergency transport? Since you don't have any regulations, that just kind of open their.
Yeah, when it comes to that, yes, the ambulance services both transport non-emergency and emergency, and they worked it out amongst themselves according to how their need is. They get the calls directly, it doesn't go through 911.
So the parish doesn't get out, that's what I'm saying, the parish has no.
No, sir, we do not. I don't believe in the government coming in and regulating certain things. If the state's regulating it already, we're just gonna complicate it to the point where it was too much, and I'm glad both services decided to not push the issue, because dealing with a body of elected officials, they try very hard to make their selves known. And sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not good. And then we got to the point where one of the councilmen wanted to see their financials and everything. That's ridiculous. That's not about business. Our business is making sure people get the services that they need.
What about helicopters? How does that work in your parish?
Both of them have helicopter services.
Stationed in your parish or stationed?
One does, but the other was not far from it. So it actually works out well. I mean, I have zero complaints with either one of these services.
Who are your current providers?
I'm allowed to say, because I was allowed to say the names. Okay, Cicada Ambulance and Med Express.
Third one that pulled out was who?
Well, the third one was bought out.
Was bought out.
Yes, sir.
By one of the other two?
Yes, sir.
What is the call volume that you see?
I had that number in my head, yet, and I forgot where it was. I was surprised to know that a lot of these calls are going directly to the ambulance services themselves, not going through 911.
I have a question. When you said rotating, do you, at your 911 center in Lafayette in St. Louis, are y'all call takers and dispatchers, or they're all in one?
They all the same. Yeah, the dispatchers, and they rotate the calls.
So how do they give any pre-arrival for medical, or they just transfer it immediately?
No, they actually transfer, and all the information is transferred over to the ambulance services. And hopefully that they can look at their screen and know where the nearest one is. And if they cannot make it there in the right amount of time, they will transfer to the other ambulance services. That has happened, and it's working well.
Then when you say they look at their screen, are you referring to the ambulance service?
Yes, ma'am.
Their screen, not the 911 dispatch?
Correct. 911 does not have access to either one.
And how do they know for rotating?
The next call comes up, it's the next one in line. Kind of like the record services and everything else.
On the record service, I mean, you have time to stop and look at, okay, what's the next one on this? When it's a 911 medical call, do they ask the dispatcher, hey, who sent one last? So
They have it automatically on their screen. The next one up,
Screen.
the next one up, yeah.
So it's through their CAD.
Ma'am,
It's through their CAD,
through the, yes,
their CAD. Who's your 911 director?
Jude Mulrow.
So just a question off the word of piggybacking. So I'm going to give you an example of how it works in this parish and tell me if it's the same or different. So someone could call the Refuge Fair Sheriff's Office, Conway Police Department, and say, we have a serious vehicle crash out here, we need an ambulance. Does, let's say Bill Platt takes some call in your parish. If Bill Platt immediately takes that call, do they transfer that to your 911 center for them to dispatch the ambulance, or do you know how any of that works?
Right, no, but if the call comes into the police department, sheriff's office, then they'll do the dispatching from there. But they urge everybody to call 911, but obviously sometimes they just call directly to the sheriff's office or the local police department, but they'll do it themselves. There's no rotating basis at those locations.
So if the call doesn't come through 911, if the rotation's out, they just call whoever they think.
Whoever,
Bill Platt would just call whoever they think is best.
exactly. Yes, sir.
So, but no regulation, I was just asking that. I understand, I wouldn't want to be out of business finances either, but I do think from time management, like how y'all track and see whether responding in time, is there one's responding better than others? Or, you know, how do you track time?
911 gives me a report. If I would ask for a report, I have been asking for reports because I listen to the radio myself. I have the radios in my office and in my truck and everywhere I go. And I'll see, and the question came up from me, was, I live in Eunice, and it's 20 miles from my producers, and I'll see a unit pass by, the next thing I know, I'll see another unit passing by going to Eunice, and why didn't that one just go do the call? And of course, you don't know the answer to that question because everybody's assigned where they need to be at. The ambulance services are good at telling us whether or not they can provide that service in that timeframe that they think is going to be. I think we agreed on 15 minutes, something depending on the nature of the call. And on the major accident, all of them.
But y'all don't have, they don't track like on a monthly basis or whatever.
911 does.
But who, they track it or they do something with it? I mean, it's one thing with the data, so
They
that,
just, they have it for us if we need to.
so,
And if there's a question that comes up, sometime it did come to my office, I contact you and they give me information, I contact the ambulance services. And now that we're trying to regulate, we just want to have some answers, so people call me, I can have a good answer to tell them. And coming from the fire service, everybody always say it took us forever to get there. Well, I was the fastest one in my truck, I would get there in 2 or 3 minutes, except for them, I understand it seems like hours. So when you give them the facts, then they understand a lot better.
so another question, going back to your question, so are y'all, from a call volume, so you could call this sheriff's office or the police department, whoever you want to call, if it was 911. Do you know the volume, like the percentage, does more go through 911 or does more go through the local police and local fire and local sheriff?
You know, most of it goes through 911. The majority of the calls go through 911, but I was surprised. I want to say like 35 or 40% of the calls are directed to the ambulance services, which was, to me was shocking because of 911 being so easy to call.
So then that, even though you have multiple sources, if you have 35 to 40% of your calls going to somebody who doesn't have to go on a rotating basis, then that could lead to favoritism in those routes.
Well, if they call them directly to the ambulance service, that's the choice that that person is making. And I don't see the need for us to regulate the people. If they choose to pick one or the other, that's up to them. But on the call coming to 911, unless they make a special request, and sometimes they do, it goes to the next one on the list.
So do y'all, going back to the time thing, do y'all compare? So, you know, so you said 15-minute call rate, you know, just using that number, that's it. You know, you see those numbers from 911, are you seeing that? I'm not asking for data, but I'm asking is that whatever the group is, whether it's police, church, whatever, they all go down and say, hey, this one seems to be responding better than the others, and so that would be a better option.
Basically, when it comes to my office, if I need to get that information, Jude usually looks at things and he'll bring it to my attention and there's something to it. But I'm telling you, we don't have that issue. We know we're very rural. We know the northern part of our parish is going to be at least a 35-minute run. And there's nothing anybody can do about it. And it's a business, it's not something that I don't think either service would want to put an ambulance up in the northern part of our parish and not get a call all day. So it's a business and I understand it, but they all make efforts to stage units. You know, working together works out good for us in our parish. And it has been, and it's always been, and we're very lucky to have that.
What's the population?
82,500 something.
So you're not doing anything to regulate the their response time and how quick it is. When they show up, they show up, when they transfer.
I have a good working relationship with all the services, those two services. And we all kind of agree, let's let it play out where it is and see how we can make it work, because government starts regulating things, then business starts to, it's tough for business to provide services. And if we don't put what some of these councilmen want to put in place, we want to rent money. It makes no sense, you know? And so I go to the calls, and okay, I mean, so I'm different, I'm a different parish president than most. I'll get called to go to tornadoes and whatever else, I'll go myself. And another part of our parish is our longest distance. And everybody understands that. People who move to that part of the parish understand the delay is going to be there. And do they complain? Sometimes, but they chose to move in that area. They chose to do certain things. And I know sometimes some of the services provided from Orleans Parish comes down to St. Anthony's closer. So there was, so they work, the ambulance services work it out to make sure that they get the service, that we get the service we need. You know, whichever one it is, it doesn't matter to me. I'll work good with both of them.
Anybody else have a question?
Do y'all provide any kind of subsidy to either one?
No, sir. And that was the big question. And since we don't provide, then how can we demand? And I don't want to have to provide. Because, I mean, it's working, and I don't want to have to start spending government money on this when we don't have to. And I think if we start regulating, then they might start demanding some type of payment. I mean, if you're gonna make them do something, somebody gotta pay them. It's a job, it's a business.
You said a while ago that if they call the ambulance service directly, it was that person, the caller's choice, they pick the ambulance service. If they call 911, does your 911 give them an option? If they say, hey, I want a specific ambulance, do they send them?
They don't get an option, but if the caller just asks for a certain ambulance service, then they're gonna provide that certain ambulance service. That's be the first one they're gonna call. Yes, ma'am.
Is there any oversight on billing between the two companies?
No, sir. Not on 911, no, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank y'all. You have a good day.
Anybody else? Any comments?
Good afternoon, I'm Shane Davidson, I'm the COO for Pafford EMS over in Louisiana, Mississippi. About a year and a half ago, the city of Alexandria contacted me, and I spoke to the city in regard to the advantages and disadvantages of having a multi-provider service versus a sole provider. In my professional opinion, a sole provider is the only way to go. I'm from Washington Parish, so I knew Jay, who spoke to you last week. And he alluded to a lot of things I want to say. Ambulance industry, the ambulance service, running one is extremely expensive, and those expenses have doubled since then. In regard to the price of supplies, the fire department probably see that too. Supplies, payroll has increased. The cost of an ambulance has almost doubled. In the ambulance industry, there's two types of calls: emergency and non-emergency. If you have a sole providership, that sole provider needs those non-emergency transports to subsidize the loss you take on the emergencies. We only get paid on about 30% of the emergencies we run. There's a lot of times when we respond to a 911 call and nobody's injured. They actually weren't transported. We call that a dry run. That dry run costs money, unfortunately. And so when you don't have those non-emergency transport that are paid for Medicare, Medicaid, private insurance, or any other payer sources, that's what you have to subsidize the loss that you take on the emergencies. If you have multiple providers, you're going to end up crippling the 911 provider, your contracted 911 provider. You don't get paid, you don't make any money on just 911 calls. But if you have another provider, you've got them getting all we call a cream. They're getting all the paying calls while your contracted 911 providers having to go to the calls that don't pay. Eventually, the only way to combat those costs is to cut trucks. When you cut trucks, you jeopardize response times. So, I mean, it's as simple as that. And so, we're for a sole providership. I explained that to the city council about a year ago, half ago. It also alleviates the city or the parish from paying a subsidy. If you only have a sole provider, they're going to have enough volume and enough revenue so really shouldn't have to ask for a subsidy. You know, if they're doing their patient care reports right, submitting things to, the billing office and the billing is, you know, they know what they're doing. We are, we also do something at Pafford. I think one of the reasons for our success is we're very transparent. We supply our raw CAD data at 3 a.m. to whoever wants it. We usually send it to communication directors, fire chiefs. We do that every single day. With good, bad, and ugly. It shows the calls for that particular day, the call times, where the call was received, en route, on scene, where they transported to. We believe, I mean, it's all about accountability. We're very data specific, data driven. We use that data to determine what days, you know, to look at trends, to determine what days of the weeks. There's some days of the weeks that are busier than others. Summertime is usually busier than others. If kids are off school, there's more going on. So we use those trends to determine, okay, how many unit hours, how many trucks do we need up on Monday? How many do we need up on Tuesday? So very, very data driven industry. But another thing that I don't like, and I'll wrap it up. You know, when you've got two providers and you're doing that call rotation, let's just say it's Acadia and Net Express, I'll use them example. So let's say it's Acadia's turn to get a 911 call. Then the next call is Med Express. How do you know that Acadian, if you're not tracking their trucks, how do you know that Acadian may not be closer to that second call than Med Express is? You don't know that because they're dispatching from two different places. So you may have an Acadian, it may not be their turn in the rotation, but they may have a truck right around the corner from an emergency that just came in. So that's why I think, in my opinion, that the rotation doesn't work. I mean, it sounds good in theory to have a bunch of different ambulance services. More ambulances are better, but that's not really the case.
Is just to ask a question, is your company anywhere where you're in a multiple provider area?
One. And we do a rotation there, we don't like it.
If you don't mind me asking where
It's in Minden,
Webster Parish?
Webster Parish.
Webster.
Yeah.
Not the city of Minden.
Well, both, it's the entire parish. Yeah,
That's what that name's, right?
correct. Yeah. And it works, it's okay. I mean, but we have a really good relationship with Gary Jones, the guy that owns the best, that we talk, and, you know, we mutual aid very well with him. But, I still like it. Yeah, any other question?
Whenever you do multiple units, do you cut back, if you have two companies, would you cut back, say if you have 10 ambulances in your parish, so you have two ambulance services that are only going to provide enough money for 5 ambulances each? Does that change anything? I know it's X amount of dollars per ambulance, so it seems like you still, I don't know, that's a question I have.
You're saying if you have multiple providers,
Yes, you're gonna not have you're gonna have the same amount of ambulances for money wise in the parish.
right?
What two of them combined? You're not gonna have 10 to 10, you'd have 5 to 5. You understand what I'm saying?
Correct.
You hold 10 in the parish money wise.
Right, but if you're the contracted emergency provider, you have to make sure that you have enough resources to cover those 911 calls. You may need 5 or you may need 10. I mean, that's why we're having it. I mean, you never know.
So since you're data driven, I'll ask this question. If hypothetically, if it was a multi-payer, let's say there was one sole emergency provider and several non-emergency providers, what would your stipulation be for you to be the emergency provider and share the non-emergency?
We would more than likely have to ask for subsidy because we're taking the brunt of all the other 3 providers are getting paid on the majority of the calls that they're running. The emergency provider,
A money subsidy, or are you talking about
a money subsidy.
taking a higher percentage of non?
So pass that again. Sorry.
A money subsidy, or would you agree to take a higher percentage of the non-emergency transport?
It would have to be a money subsidy because we can't control, you know, the only way you control the non-emergencies is through marketing efforts. You just have to be, you know, you have to go to the hospitals and market, hope that they called you. But if they didn't, because we're always tied up on emergencies, then we're obligated to run the emergency calls. Unfortunately, we're obligated to run those 911 calls, whether they have the ability to pay or not. So more than likely, a provider would have to come to the city or the parish for a subsidy if you weren't allowed to absorb those non-emergency transporters.
You may have answered this already, but your revenue, what percentage is attached to the non-emergency emergency? Roughly.
I'd say probably, our revenue is probably 65% non-emergency. We collect a lot more revenue on the non-emergency side of reimbursement. And that's due, there's more non-emergency calls typically, and the reimbursements higher. And you're dealing with people that have payer sources. Gotta give you, the emergency, somebody's need to pay for.
You mentioned, enough ambulances to cover emergencies. If you have the emergency services contract, and I guess my question is there an industry formula based upon geographic area and population and the number of ambulances you would be required to cover just the emergency services?
Right. There's a lot of different factors. One of the things that people don't think about is out-of-town trips. Out-of-town trips really have an adverse effect on your emergency business. If you've got a lot of trips that are going to LSU, New Orleans, Baton Rouge, Shreveport, wherever they may go, they're going out of town. That may take one of your emergency trucks out of town for, out of service for 4, 5, 6 hours, who knows? And that depletes a resource. So it's a holistic approach. You have to look at all the hospitals. One of the first things that we do when we go into a new area is we research all volume coming out of the hospitals. That's crucial because you can get tied up on all those non-emergencies and need your resources to run the emergencies. So non-emergency, they go hand in hand, but it's very important.
When you talk about emergency transport from like Cabrini, just pull it out, from Cabrini to Lafayette Thompson, is that what you're referring to? Or are you talking about just a patient transport?
Yeah, emergent or non-emergent. Just somebody maybe going to a higher level of care, somebody being discharged from the hospital back to a nursing home.
It takes one of your ambulances out there.
Correct. We want to know how many times does that truck leave Rapides Parish. That's very, very important to balance the emergency need.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Someone else have comments they'd like to make?
Thank you. Paul Fusilier, Business Development Director for Acadian Ambulance. Shane, I think Shane gave you a very good overview of why a sole provider is the way we need to go. He hit on some very important points. You don't get paid on the emergency side. You need the non-emergency side to support the resources that you have for the emergency side. It's a balancing act every day. Shane talked about being data-driven, absolutely, you have to, and you gotta look at it daily, because your volumes change daily. You may go on a Monday at a high rate, a high volume, and all of a sudden Tuesday bottoms out. How do you plan for that? The only way to plan for that is to take historical data, looking at it over months and years, to try to get yourself ready for when those things happen. And you have to be ready to change at the drop of a hat. And that's why looking at things on a daily basis is important. And that's one of the things that we do. Do we need to add resources? Because the volume suddenly peaks. We do that. We look at the time of day. Is it from 10 o'clock in the morning till 4 o'clock in the afternoon, all of a sudden you got a spike? And that's where we need the most resources so that we can handle that spike, whether it be emergency or non-emergency services. So multiple services will cause issues. You may not see issues in the beginning, but as time goes, you're gonna start seeing services change. You're gonna start seeing companies change. The gentleman from St. Andrew Parish talked about a service being bought out. Well, there was a reason for that. It was getting very, very difficult for that service to maintain what they were doing because of what Shane spoke of. The changes that are going on with EMS every day. So he made a choice. So he went from 3 to 2. There's some areas you have 2 that are down to 1. It catches up with it because of what the multiple providers do to the system. So we are obviously in favor of a sole provider, as we have been in many, many markets. We do have some markets, as Shane spoke of, that we are multiple providers, not by choice, but by, that's the way it kind of played out. Why haven't we done anything in a multiple provider location? Well, we're committed. You know, there are areas which have entertained multiple providers that we've been there for 30 years. We can pick up our toys and go. Because financially and staffing and everything else starts to hurt. But we choose not to do that because of the commitment that we have made to those people for the last 30 years. We're gonna hang on. We're gonna make some adjustments now. Have to make adjustments in a business sense in order to continue. But we want to stay committed to the people that have for so long trusted us with their EMS services in their lives. So I just wanted to mention that we, as Pathway, are all for the sole provider system. And we hope that that is something that you take a hard look at.
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
So in the, I don't know if you're on from Med Express or not, maybe not. Where y'all are at in the St. Landry deal, I know years ago, this is going back, Kagan used to have the, so where you kind of marketed yourself for people to call you directly. Do y'all, and that's kind of went away in Rapids Parish, where that's not really that big of a thing or big of a push as it used to be. Is that something y'all still do in St. Landry in order to try and get part of that market share, or, you know what I'm talking about, right?
Well, I'll say this, we do market it that way, but there's a reason for it. Whenever a multiple provider system starts up, the first thing that people are told, we're here to give you a choice. But they rotate everything. It's not choice. Okay? Will you ask, do you have a choice? Well, 911 systems sometimes don't want to do that because it's taking time. Their people are busy. So the selling point of we're giving you a choice no longer becomes a choice. So yes, we have to start marketing. Call us directly if you want us. Because if you don't, you're gonna get whoever's next up on the list. So to answer that, Chief, yes, we do market ourselves in that way to call us directly if you want to choose us as your provider. And especially in a non-emergency type situation. Those calls don't go to 911, obviously. So.
If you were to get a call, an emergency call through 911 and they call direct to you, how do the first responders know to show up? How do you?
We make a notification.
Y'all call for us.
If the first responders in that area or do want to operate, want to run calls in that area, we'll make a notification. The first responder system has changed over the years as well with fire departments over time. The volunteer piece of that is, and I'm speaking as the fire chiefs here know that. But some areas have chosen to run only certain calls. Some choose not to run anymore. Some want to run on everything, which is absolutely fantastic. So, but we would make that notification for assistance in that area.
So do y'all call in the same thing, deal, if someone calls you, Acadian directly, do y'all in turn call 911 and,
That would,
or do you call the, let's say it's the Unis, do you call the Unis Fire Department? Or do you know, I'm not trying to push you on the spot.
well, 911 would be the place to call because 911 has all the other
Right.
contacts. Does that make sense? We do have, contacts and phone numbers of individual departments, but you get people that would be 911 stuff.
So y'all do one.
It would make sense to let them know we're responding here. Can you call the local fire department for assistance?
But you're all working backwards. If they have to call you direct, you'd rather go through 911 so that you notify fire and medical all at one time.
In a perfect situation, yes. Sole provider?
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Best case scenario is where they go through 911. They don't call you
Oh, absolutely, we don't want to circumvent 911, but
direct. I'm saying there's less confusion if
absolutely,
911
the confusion
regulations
is gone.
and they're not calling every provider out there.
Absolutely, the confusion is gone. But then, in multiple provider system, then the onus goes to 911 on who gets the next call. In a sole provider system, it's automatic, they know who's getting the next call. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Tyler Martin, the operations manager from Parish. What I want to speak on is the benefit of multiple providers. Multiple providers brings in competition, competition breeds honesty. Many of the facilities in this city, we had service recently, years ago. We met with individuals on this committee about that, and we brought them solutions because they were having such extended pickup times, anywhere from 6 hours to 24 hours. It also gave your facilities the option to negotiate with the ambulance companies. Under sole provider, there's not anyone else there for these facilities, these institutions, or these patients at home to call. We work in areas where we are with multiple providers. We only work in one parish where we're sole provider, and we have not forced the parish to put an ordinance up for claiming it to be sole provider. That parish, as far as we are concerned, is open for business for any ambulance provider that would like to come into that parish. That is Sabine Parish. We work very well with that parish, but as we do with all of the neighboring parishes. Yes, the 911 rotation can be confusing. I would urge anyone to reach out to the areas that have 911 rotation and hear it from those 911 directors. In these meetings, it can get a little confusing. Once it gets into play and it starts working out, it works very well. You can put into your ordinance response time proclivities for each area and hold them accountable. If the first provider can't be on scene within 8 minutes or 15 minutes, you add in a stipulation that they're to notify the next service, and then they will respond, or they will see. Yes, there will be times that one service may have an ambulance a few minutes closer, but what you'll get away from is the ambulances that are 60 minutes away, that are 45 minutes away. We will also bring in additional resources with wheelchair vans, non-emergency ambulances to free up the emergency side. We've been here for many years and worked very closely with a lot of the facilities and institutions, and we continually receive calls that they want to see it opened up for that. If it does move into a sole provider, yes, we will put in a bid for it. But what we would like to see is it opened up to multiple providers to bring additional solutions to the parish.
So are you is Medicare looking to increase their take on non-emergency, or if it opened up to multi, do y'all want this to do emergency at all?
Absolutely, we bring solutions for the emergency and non-emergency side.
So I'll piggyback on, so I'll ask you the same question I asked Mr. Hughley. In the St. Landry deal, do y'all have like a direct 3-digit number for people to call, and do y'all do marketing?
We market heavily. We have a full robust marketing team that goes out to these facilities.
and meets with the individuals, the decision makers there, and reports back to us, and we make the adjustments on the operations side.
How about the people calling for emergency?
So yes, so when you get into the nursing home, the nursing homes rarely call 911, they call direct. Some homebound patients don't want police and fire and all that coming for something minor. So they'll call us direct. If we receive a direct call and it's someone not breathing or someone has been shot, we would immediately notify 911 of that. But a lot of our homebound patients understand when they dial 911, what all comes with that, and they don't want that. Or they've had negative experiences with other companies and they just want to use us directly. And even still then, our response time to that homebound patient may be significant. And we'll relay that to the caller. And if they want us to notify a different service, we will happily do that. We'll do whatever's in the best decision of the patient.
In reference to rate structure, in the areas where multiple providers are allowed, are your rates, do they mirror the other providers?
So our rates are not, there's nothing proclaiming how high we can charge. There is rates on how low we can charge. And that's set by Medicare and Medicaid.
Right.
And all of our contracts are at Medicare rate. It's the lowest we can legally go without having a kickback violation. We also do, our billing is very robust and different than the other ones. We don't, and they can claim to it. We've gone to them with their invoices and explained each individual one, rather than just sending an invoice for every treatment.
So let me ask a question hypothetically, with you guys down the same lane, repair, rotation, where it's every other one, basically. So if you had a rotation where one day you were the primary for emergencies, and then the following day you were primary for non-emergency, would that work out better for both companies?
That I don't know, because I've never seen that or know of anywhere that does that, where it alternates the days with the emergencies and the non-emergencies. Now, I do know that there are some areas in the state that alternate days with the emergencies, but they don't alternate with the non-emergency. My advice on that is let the competition decide how the non-emergency is handled. But the alternating days with the emergency would not be an issue.
Because to me, it makes sense, because one of the big issues for everybody that's spoken is the fact that the cream is the non-emergency. So if you were on a rotating basis for emergency and the non-emergency, then basically half the month you get the emergency, half the month you get non-emergency.
Yes, in theory, however, with non-emergency patients, especially reoccurring transports, whether it's dialysis, wound care, for paperwork that's required to file that to that, alternating that between services would not be a good outcome for them. For simple hospital discharges, it would not be an issue alternating that, but for the long-term continuing transports, it would be an issue for that.
But in that case, the patient choice, they could choose whichever one, and then it would no longer be on a rotating basis, right?
Yeah, we've always said, let the emergencies go through 911, let the homebound patients decide who they want to use.
Any other comments?
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Any other public comments from people? Very good. Thank you all very much for the input. It was excellent discussion. We need all the info we can get, so we appreciate that. Also wanted to open the floor up to any of the committee members, advisory committee members, want to make any comments as well.
Mr. Chairman, I'll just state to the committee member, I said, current parish ordinance is so of emergency and so at some point we'll be asking the committee to make a decision for a recommendation to the police bureau of staying so provided. That's not today. That's food for thought. We'll ask you to, look at the Washington ordinances that we provided, you know, their information you can provide, and we give you that some thought, that there will be a decision to be made at a different meeting.
Can we get a snapshot of what the state regulates? Where St. Andrews said they only deal with what the state has on the books. Can we get a copy of that just to,
We'll get the state regulations.
or just to, or one paper, whatever?
They're very basic, because the statute I gave y'all at the last meeting reserved the right to the parish or municipality to dictate what they're going to do within that parish. So the state is very basic.
Just to see.
Yeah, sure.
So are we, is the ordinance going to be coming before the recommendation for request, or do the recommendations come after? You know, it's kind of,
The ordinance will precede the RFPs
okay,
being drafted.
so
So that they will essentially be a mirror.
I think what I'm seeing as our goal initially is to review and give input on the ordinances initially, so that way the police jury can start their process of getting the ordinance.
And technically, the first decision will be the state sole provider, we'll move to multiple providers, because that is going to dictate how the ordinance is drafted. Ordinance will be drafted after that decision is made. Once the police jury adopts the ordinance, then we'll begin working on an RFP.
So what is our timeline? I know we have October, so, I mean, just looking at it right now, there's no way we're gonna make that.
We may not make the October 31st deadline, but sure, our provider will continue to make a decision. But I'm gonna tell you, you're making timeline-wise, you're not making good progress.
So should we make a recommendation to the police jury to make a request of the current provider to extend for, say, 3 months? So that way we don't become under a crunch that we're going, we've got to get this done quickly. And that gives us a little bit more time to actually do that.
I'm sure that would be a problem.
And do you have a date in mind of when you want us to make a decision on sole versus multiple provider? Depends every kind of target date other than tomorrow.
I would say probably within the next month, you have to make that decision, because that's the cog that puts the wheel.
Will we, so we're gonna, as a group, say sole provider, multi-provider, is there also a request to say some of the facets of that? So, response time, some of the, when do those details come in? Is that by the police jury in the ordinance, or is, how does that?
That will come into play in the ordinances in the RFP. You know, if you want to dictate rates, you want to dictate response time, we will leave it open for competition from three. It appears we're going to have 3 proposals.
Just to know how detailed the ordinance was versus the RFP.
Well, you know, if you read through the same, up for Washington Parish, you can see that they dictated some things, they left some things open, just like our 1994 ordinances do. They dictated some things, they left some things to the company submitting rates and response time. And that gives you something that you can grade between the proposals.
But you could be more detailed in the RFP versus the ordinance.
Correct.
The requirements in the RFP could be more stringent than the ordinance.
Yes.
So we could just say the ordinance would say either multiple or sole. But in a generalized thing. And
Well, in a generalized thing, but you're also going to be covering, like if you look at the current ones we have, you have to have on-site helicopter ambulance service for that. You have to provide some rural service for that. Because as Mayor Butler mentioned, that's a big part of the ambulance service in Refuge Parish is the rural service. So, yes, your ordinance would basically have a minimum set of requirements. You are in big strict.
So one of the things, for us, all the services we're talking about, data that we're getting, they get data, they're looking at data. perhaps it might be a good idea for us to get some data for the last couple of years for the current provider, for us to be able to look at, to be able to see what we're actually requesting as far as additional information. Or based on their data, are we getting the service that they're saying that we're getting? And we may not just look at the data they're providing, it may need to be more raw data versus, their gone through data.
Well, that's something else that you can specify in your RFP. I want response time data.
Right.
Exactly.
But what about like for now, looking for our discussion for sole provider, otherwise we don't have a clue, are they really doing what they're supposed to be doing?
I know that we have on file the monthly reports for response times, which we can assume. If the current provider wanted to submit something more detailed, that would be allowable for them to do. But on the record, we have the monthly reports, and I can have our staff.
Yeah, look at those.
Let's go back in.
And just keep in mind too, that our recommendation of sole provider versus multiple provider, if we go sole provider, that doesn't mean our current provider gets the job. If we go multiple provider, it doesn't mean our current provider gets, the job.
Right.
So,
I understand that, but when we're talking data, we need to have data. And for us to kind of make the decision on sole versus, we want to see what the sole provider is doing to give us that information.
I mean, it's great that we're fortunate enough to have 3 service providers that are, I believe, are willing to participate in the proposal part, because whether you decide when you want to sole or multiple, you're going to get some good competitive proposals.
Angie, do you have data on response? We do not keep up with response time. Okay.
One thing about data too, with the current provider, we have data for our parish, but the other providers have data for other parishes.
Right.
So it's not just.
It's strictly, kind of, this is what we have now.
I would hope that Greg says that we stipulate in the proposal.
Right.
That they delineate that data.
Yeah.
We can see all the three from a partner, there's 3 proposals.
Well, I think in the RFP, then what we need to look at is, then we need to look at their kind of more raw data that they have. Because what we're getting in the reports, if you look at the reports that we currently get, they're already taking that data and pulling information down. They're not giving us the whole data. They're taking out, probably, I forget how what the percentages that they're taking actually out, saying that they're out of this number of calls, they're removing these because they don't meet that criteria of being what's in the criteria for them to report on. Absolutely.
Does the parish have a advisory panel to look at these data? By ordinance and in theory, yes. In practicality, no, it expired sometime before my time. But you will see what I provided you and what Mr. Mitchell discussed last time. The end result of this process will be a permanent committee. It meets at least quarterly to cover the response times and to dig further into the data, and not only that, to cover complaints. If it's citizens or hospital or nursing home, whoever it is, have a complaint with the response time or the way it was handled, it can go to that committee. And that committee can, you have ordinances that will have fines, and of course, for multiple offenses, you could end up losing your contract. But there will be assistance. County.
Next meeting, I think, becoming pretty clear that we need to focus on the recommendation of sole entity. Remember, we're just making a recommendation of jury makes a decision whether to go that direction. Because they're relying on us to get them the advisement to them. So, I would like to put on the agenda that being the most important discussion for the next meeting. Depending on the discussion, we may want to go ahead and vote on that, or is there any more information, we just have to see what the discussion leads to. But I would say that there could be a possibility we may go ahead and take it. One of the dates we talked about, the next meeting is July 17th, and noon has been a good time. We same format, starting noon. Meet here again. Just for many members so that we just have a room. So that would be it. So let's go ahead and go with July 17th at noon. Any other comments from the committee?
It was great talking. Just can I say one thing? We're talking about, I know a lot of you guys are familiar with the ordinances and stuff when it comes to a single provider. It makes it easier to give you some reading material. In the last few years, Jeff Davis and Acadia went to a multi-provider system where they had to completely redo their ordinances and how two entities are gonna work, how the response time system is gonna work, and how the roads and all that stuff's gonna work. And I work in every two parishes, and I work with those guys every week when it comes to the data you were talking about. If you go to Muni Code online, MUNICODE, type in the parish you're looking for, their ordinances of what they had to rewrite for a multi-provider and the service are online. You can actually go through and read them and see what the difference is between a single and a multiple provider.
Which parish?
Just to read material.
Which parish?
The best ones that were written more recently would be Acadia Parish and then Jeff Davis Parish. And they, like Acadia Parish, they'll show them there to where what's required for two, and then each one have to have 2 aircrafts within X amount of minutes. And if you get a call that comes in and you can't make it within 8-minute response time in the city of Crowley, then it has to be called to the other service. And if they can make it quicker, it has to be rolled. And then at the end of the week or month or however the ordinance is set up, we have to report how many was rolled from one service to the other and the reason why. And they keep a track of that.
What's your name, sir?
I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you. I just remember I heard some of the questions. My name is Corey Miller. I'm with the air side of Express. It's called Air Evac. So I manage the air division for Express.
I wish you made your comments during the public comment.
Oh, no, I just wanted you to find somewhere to lift some reading material.
It would have been all recorded and
Yeah, sure.
you're not talking in the mic, but that's okay. So, all right, I'll entertain a motion for the matter.
I'll take it.
Motion. Everybody opposed? Thank you.